Welcome to the Hyborian Keep. I'm Old Man Hyborian. Here, we review tales of Robert E. Howard's greatest character, Conan, the Barbarian. Today, we're going to review the Conan novel, The Scions of Ymir, by David L. Irick. This won't be some fluffy review. It'll be an old man's honest opinion. And just as a heads up, there will be spoilers. So I don't want you to go crying to your mommy if I say something that spoils it for you. If you don't want the spoilers, go to the summary at the end. And if you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. And with that, let's get after it. So here we have the hard copy Conan novel, The Scions of Ymir, by David L. Irick. It says it's based on Robert E. Howard's The Hour of the Dragon, but I'll tell you right now it has absolutely nothing to do with that. The only thing that it has in common is that Conan's a king. So it's hard copy, published in 2024. It's 271 pages long. There are no graphics inside, and there's no credit for the cover, so I'm assuming that the cover is just a digital image. So it starts off with Aquilonia and all of the surrounding lands in some kind of a deep freeze. There's this cold wind blowing. It's abnormal, everything's freezing up, and nobody knows what's going on. So Conan calls in all the local sorcerers and also the leaders of the different religious cults. He wants to get to the bottom of it, and he wants some answers. So while he's waiting for these people to assemble, he decides to take off in the morning to go cut some wood. He takes off from the city all by himself, goes out into the woods, starts cutting some trees, and eventually one of his officers show up with the wood cutting crew. So right off the bat, Conan is rude to them. He punches one of them out. It displayed a lot of character that really wasn't Conan. So eventually this messenger shows up and says that all of the sorcerers and the religious cults are all gathered. So Conan goes in. He sits down. Right off the bat, he insults them all. So they talk and they eat. And finally it's determined that the cold wind is caused by the god Ymir. So Conan forms a plan that he's going to head north and find out what's going on. So all through the story, it's kind of scattered to how come Ymir is back awake again, because he was put into this deep sleep and now he's up and raising hell. There was this adventurer slash scholar slash sorcerer named Traldikal Swarden, and he has word that there's a great treasure in the north. So he goes to this seedy tavern, meets this old guy there, and he buys this map and this magic chisel that will go through rock just like a hot knife through butter. And he also has a book with this gem on it. So then he hires some scholar to decipher this map, because it's a map from many, many years ago, so he can go find this treasure. So you find out at the end of the book, basically, that there's this religious order called the House of Ymir. They were setting this poor sap up to go and free Ymir from his deep sleep. So back to Conan, he takes off. He's going to a northern fort to find out what's going on up north. Takes off alone, which is, again, is a common theme, that the king of Aquilonia is taking off alone with no guards or anything. So on the way, he stays at this rundown barn, and the author makes it a point, using several pages, that there was this big heavy door that was off its rails for the barn, and it was so heavy it would take, 4 or 5 men to pick it up. But Conan, he doesn't want to get cold, so he picks up this door and puts it back on. And then later that night, a couple of messengers are coming back. They stop at this barn to tell Conan that the giants are attacking the fort. And these messengers, they make note that they stopped there many, many times and the door was never on. And several of them tried many times to put the door back on. It was just too heavy, so they were all amazed that Conan actually did it themselves. So, all that was kind of lame. Don't know what the point of it was, just to maybe emphasize how strong Conan actually is. So anyway, Conan peels out of there. He's going up to this fort, and when he gets there, there's this army of giants, and they're called Jotun, and they're ready to attack the fort. So they're attacking the fort. Conan, he goes outside of the fort by himself. He's sneaking around killing them, and then he confronts 4 or 5 of them, and he ends up killing them. So it ends up that soldiers, they beat off the giants and they retreated, and shortly after that, Conan's main army arrives at the fort. So they decide on a plan, and that plan is that Conan's going to take off by himself again to go scouting for these giants. So anyway, Conan, he's out running around looking for these giants. He finds them. There's about 4,000 of them, and he attacks them all by himself. So once he's got them all worked up, he gets on his horse and he heads back to his main army, and the giants are all running after him, and they have this great ambush. So Conan's army ends up defeating these giants. Even though Conan lost about 10,000 men, they defeated these 4,000 giants. So the next course of action is that he has to go find Ymir. So he heads north. He has to get to Hyperborea. He actually does take a handful of cavalrymen with him. So on the way there, they have to go to this, what they call the Skull Gate. And it is a rock formation that looks like a skull. The only way to pass through that to get to the plateau of Hyperborea. So on the way, he meets this witch. The witch tells his future, but it's kind of cryptic. And he ends up sleeping with the witch. And then the next morning, the witch is driving away on this wagon, being pulled by a one-legged horse. And the witch is an old hag. So Conan's wondering if he slept with an old hag. After that encounter, they get to the Skull Gate, and the giants have blocked it with all of the castles that they've ripped down all through the land, and they blocked it with all the debris, and there's several giants there guarding. So Conan comes up with a plan that he's going to climb this debris, and then the soldiers are going to attack, and Conan's going to throw boulders down from the top. So this works out fairly good for Conan. The men, they all take off. They eventually all get killed, but Conan, he climbs over the debris and gets up onto the plateau of Hyperborea. When he gets there, there's a whole bunch of giants crucified on all these crosses. And as he's walking, he's taken by this spell that he becomes weak and he can hardly walk. And he meets up with this big Aesir guy. So it ends up that he is the god Woden. He's amazed that he's not dead because the spell is supposed to kill everybody, but you know, Conan, he powered through. And he takes Conan to this tavern that a bunch of Aesir are at. Tells him to drink and eat and lust and fight all he wants. And he gives him this drink. It's called the Nectar of the Gods that apparently no human can drink. So Conan ends up drinking 5 hornfuls of this liquor, and he's right out of her. And these 2 guys come in. They're actually Woden's brothers, Willi and Wee, and they're also gods. So Conan picks a fight with one of them, and he gets the tar beat out of him. So Woden ends up taking him off to Asgard in the deep north, where he has his keep. And his wife, his name is Frigg, and she nurses Conan back to health. And they end up telling the story how Woden's father, Bor, and his grandfather, Buri, had defeated Ymir years ago. And Buri was actually the second god born after Ymir. So Conan, he gets all mended up in Woden's keep. There's 2 doors. One door leads to this magic garden. The other one leads to Valhalla. So they go into the garden, and there's this giant tree thing there, and Woden, he's hanging from the tree, and he's plucked his eye out because he wanted to find information out how he could kill Ymir, and that was the only way that he could do it. So comes to find out that the information that Woden received is that Conan and him are tied together. They have to work together to defeat Ymir. So Conan has to get back to his men. He offers Conan a way to get back there by magic, that he can be there in just a short amount of time, but Conan refuses that. So Woden gives him this magic horse that can travel great distances over a short period of time. So he gets on this horse and he heads back towards his men. And after several hours, he has to cross this ice floe. So he abandons the horse, he crosses the ice floe, and then he encounters this snow ape, which he has to battle, and he kills that. He eventually gets back to his men, and they have just finished clearing the rubble from the Skull Gate. So he gathers all his men up and he heads north. And then just like out of the blue, the author makes reference to Castle Alagoa with the witch Vamatar, who's at this castle. And it's a reference to Elsprague de Camp and Lynn Carter's story of Legions of the Dead. Just out of the blue. I don't know how come he kind of threw that in there. I don't know if he needed to make his book a little bit longer or what. But anyway, so Conan, he talks to all his generals about this castle and how it's a threat. He wants to attack that. So he goes and he surrounds the castle. And then him and a few others, they go off looking for this cave where Ymir was held. So they eventually find the cave. And when they go in there, they find the dead body of that adventurer, Traldicon. When he arrived at the location based on his map, he used the magic chisel to bore a hole into Ymir's cave. And he's seen the statue there of Ymir, and it had several golden skulls on his waist, so he climbs up and he cuts them loose and he loads them onto his wagon. And then he's wondering if the statue's eyes are made of gems, so he climbs up the statue, which is hundreds of feet tall, and he starts prying on these eyes, and he finds out that the eyes are real. So this freaks him out, and he falls, and he splatters all over the floor. He was carrying this jewel, and it fell and it split in 2. And as soon as it split, it apparently was holding the soul of Ymir, so Ymir was freed. So Ymir got out of the cave, and it was at this time that he had whipped up this big winter wind that was affecting Aquilonia and all the other countries. So when Conan and his crew get into this cave, all they see is the footprints. Conan picks up this magic chisel that's laying on the floor, and he picks up the broken gem, and he puts that in his belt. And then he sends a message to his men that he's not going to tackle the castle right now. He's going to follow these footsteps because he's going to go kill Ymir. So he meets up with the army and they're heading north, and all of a sudden this big massive storm picks up and the army can't advance any farther. But Conan, he can, so he keeps on going. He gets to this location that the giants have secured, and there's thousands of them there along with Ymir. Well, at that time, Woden has sent a couple of his ravens down to get Conan's attention for Conan to climb the mountain, because Woden's up on the mountain that's overlooking Ymir. So Conan climbs up, finds Woden and his two brothers in this cave, and Woden says that he can't do anything about Ymir because he can't imprison him because he doesn't have the jewel. So Conan, he pulls out the jewel. So they devise a plan that Woden's going to use this forbidden magic to trap Ymir, and the two brothers and Conan's going to go jump down on top of Ymir and tackle him and distract him while Woden's weaving this spell. So it comes to find out that this chisel is actually a part of Woden's grandfather's sword that used to battle Ymir. So it has magical properties. So Conan, he takes the chisel, and Conan and the two brothers jump off the cliff. The brothers are hacking away at Ymir, and Conan lands on his head and drives the chisel right down into his head. Then he jumps off his head back onto the mountain cliff, and Woden's there trying to weave this spell, and he's starting to falter. So Conan, he gives him a pep talk and ends up that the spell is cast, and Ymir falls dead. So Conan, he gets back to his men, and the storm stopped once Ymir is dead. So they're going to tackle these giants, which are thousands of them there, and they have one battle, and they're getting ready the next day to do the second battle. But Conan has lost thousands of men, and they're not quite sure that they can kill these giants. And then all of a sudden, all these other men show up from all the different kingdoms throughout the land, because while Conan was off north, Queen Zenobia was petitioning all these other kingdoms to go help Conan, which they did. So they ended up with Conan and his men and all these other kingdoms. They defeated the giants. So then Conan wants to go and tackle this castle. So he goes back to the castle Alagoa, and he's talking to the witch Vamatar, telling her to surrender, but she won't. So she opens the gates, and all these zombies come pouring out, and they're about the same number of Conan's army. So they have a major fight there, and they prevail, and they kill all the zombies. And the witch, she tries to escape, but they catch her, and Conan ends up burning her at the stake. But they're hearing all these moans and groans coming from the tunnels underneath the castle, so they figure it's full of zombies. So they went down, Conan and his men, to kill these zombies. And while they're down there, they find this massive treasure. So Conan gives the treasure to all of his men. So they're taking off carrying every bit of treasure that they can. And then they light the tunnels on fire, and when they get out, they block the entrance just so that if there is any zombies that did live, that they can't get out. So after they wall up the tunnel entrance, the generals are all freaking out because they're saying that basically they're going to lose the army because Conan gave them all this treasure, and now they're all rich men. And Conan said not to worry about that, it'll all work out. So on the way back south, they end up stopping at this tavern that Conan was at earlier with the god Woden. And he strikes a deal with the tavern keeper for a certain percentage of all the money that his troops spend there. So he spends several days there, and it ends up that all the troops pretty well spent all their money. So Conan, he ends up heading back to the capital with barrels full of money that he basically scammed from all his troops. He does end up rewarding the troops, giving them all 7 years' salary. And he gets back to the capital, and he gives the queen this great big gem, and she's all happy. So overall, it was just a poor book. There was a whole bunch of crazy happenings. The author said that he did a lot of research and that he enjoyed the King Conan Black and White magazine back in the 1970s. Well, I doubt that he did either one, because it doesn't appear that he did any research, because he didn't seem to understand Conan at all. And as far as I know, King Conan was never a black and white magazine. That was the Savage Sword of Conan. So I don't know if he's some kind of a poser or not, but he did not capture Conan at all. Conan was rude. There's a bunch of crazy happenings. Like Queen Zenobia is actually a sorceress. So at one point in this story, she gets attacked, and she has a bunch of men and a steward there. And the steward was a bit of a coward, so she was all pissed off and turned him into a cat. There was references to a white-skinned Stygian. So there was just a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And the theme was Conan was eating all the time, eating and drinking, burping loudly, extremely rude to everybody. And there's a couple passages in here I'll just read just so you have an idea of the craziness. So it was after the battle at the fort. Conan and all his generals are around. They're drinking and eating. So this is the passage here. When, with a heroic and terrible report, their liege and lord broke wind with such a ferocity that everyone in attendance of the humble mess hall thought for certain that their king had done himself a disservice. And then one of his men says, "Has my liege taken ill? For I swear it smells as if he may have ingested a platter of goat offal and pig anus and washed it down with bile water." Like, what kind of crap is that? Like, that is just crazy crap. And there's another one, even worse, if you can imagine. So Conan wakes up the next day and he's all hung over real bad. Epic proportion. And he made his way to the common privy, where upon arriving proceeded with an explosion of bodily fluids from every orifice in such enormous amounts. Like, that is the last thing I really need to know is Conan going to the privy and puking and shitting and everything else. Like, that is just, and that's scattered throughout. Like, the whole thing was just beyond bizarre. Obviously, the author has no idea of how Robert E. Howard envisioned Conan, because it's definitely not that. So, a very poor book. Well, there you have it. A real doozy. I've read a lot of Conan pastiche novels, but this one was a real stinker. The author didn't capture Conan's essence at all. Conan was rude and crude. And I didn't need to know all the details about his belching and breaking wind. And every single morning when Conan got up, the author told me he had to go relieve himself. I don't really care that Conan has to go to have a leak every morning. And Queen Zenobia as a sorceress. Conan can't stand sorcery, so I can't imagine his wife being a sorceress. And then, in the middle of the whole thing, he throws in Elsprague de Camp and Lynn Carter's Legion of the Dead reference. It didn't have anything to do with anything. I have no idea. Just a bunch of filler. If you see this one on the bookshelf, turn and run away. Don't walk, run. And with that, I bid you farewell.